All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're tuned into the morning show with yours truly, Dex the Algo Capitalist. Hopefully, you had a really good night's sleep and you're well rested and ready to tackle the day. It's a very busy week on Wall Street. Tons of government reports and news. Tomorrow's FOMC, and there's just a lot going on. So let's just jump right into it. Also, I did promise you a part two from yesterday. We're looking at the transformation of the world as we know it, starting specifically with the United States of America. And that's been our focus for this week. We're looking at the totalitarianism that is gathering steam and becoming closer and closer to full global fruition. That's what we've been looking at. And we're going to do part two today. If you missed the first part, that was done yesterday. So I would strongly encourage you to listen to yesterday's broadcast because that was the first part. Today, we're going to jump into part two. The overnight markets are looking as thus. The US dollar index has done the unthinkable, the thing I warned you to look out for. I told you that last night in the watch list report. The dollar's back above 106. And because of this, the euro is now down 37 pips at 107.09. Pound sterling is down 39 pips at 125.28. And the big story is the Aussie. The Aussie is down 77 pips at 65.01, threatening to close into the 64 handle. That's a problem because that means that the bears seem to be winning out, and this could take away the bullish trend momentum reading for the Aussie and then replace it with a bearish one, which means the Aussie is toast. Bitcoin futures down 1,800 right now. That's right, down 1,800, trading at 61,650. Now, if you watched last night's watch list video report, you know that that sounds big, it sounds awful, it sounds amazing, but it's not. It's not. The market is still thousands of points off of its support lows. Ethereum futures down 170 at $3,030.50. Crude oil futures are down $1.07 this morning, trading at $81.52. We talked about that in last night's video. Nat gas is up 2 pennies at $2.05, managing to get itself back over that $2 mark. We'll see if it can hold it. Gold futures this morning, though, down $51.50 an ounce, trading at $2,306.10. We are not surprised by this. We talked about this too in last night's watch list. Silver, as a result, is having a sympathy sell-off. It's down $1.10 an ounce this morning, trading at $26.56 per ounce. Copper down 10 cents at $4.57. Dow futures down $136, trading at 38,422. E-mini S&P 500 down 15 and a half points this morning, trading at 5,031 and a half. E-mini Nasdaq 100 futures down 66 and three quarters, trading at 17,836 half. And the Russell down 18.6 points, trading at 2,008.6. So it would appear that we're having a major sell-off across the board. Pretty much every security I just named is down, with the exception of the US dollar index and nat gas. Everything else is in the red. Everything else is in the red. And we're not surprised. It's a big week for stocks. As I mentioned earlier, the Federal Reserve rate cut decision and press conference is due out tomorrow. We got the April jobs report. We got tech giants Amazon and Apple's earnings reports. We got Raymond James Chief Investment Officer Larry Adams breaking down what to watch out for during a busy week for the market. Amazon crashes the earnings party. The e commerce giant is set to report its results for the first quarter after Tuesday's closing bell, which would be today. Top Wall Street banks, including Bank of America and Goldman Sachs, are bullish on the Magnificent Seven tech stock. Elon Musk back in the news. His trip to China has paid off. Musk made a surprise visit to meet with Premier Li Qiang, I think that's how you say it, or Zhang, to discuss the rollout of full self-driving in China. Now, approval of the tech could boost Tesla sales in the country, but wouldn't be without intense competition as local rivals are developing their own versions of FSD. Now, Tesla stock surged on Musk's FSD home run. Introducing the top defense tech VCs. The space has boomed in recent years, according to PitchBook data. Defense tech startups received more than $109 billion from investors between 2021 and 2023. NVIDIA's boss has no qualms about being a demanding leader. CEO Jensen Huang has a formidable reputation, and that's the way he likes it. It should be like that, he said in a recent interview with 60 Minutes. If you want to do extraordinary things, it shouldn't be easy. Sorry, America, high interest rates are here for a while. On Wednesday, the Federal Reserve will announce its latest decision on interest rates, and traders believe borrowing costs will likely remain unchanged, according to CME FedWatch. Paramount CEO Bob Bakish stepped down for the time being. 3 executives will take his place. Bakish's exits comes as major shareholder Sherry Redstone inches closer to a sale of her controlling stake in the company. Shopify plans a switch up in its support division. Support director David Cole said in an update posted to the e-commerce firm's internal workspace page that Shopify had seen success in its AI experiments, sparking fear among some employees that job cuts are coming. In other news, Hyundai Kona is in the news. It's a practical car with pizzazz, and they believe it'll be comfortable. Supreme Court gives SEC a win over Elon Musk. Adam Neumann got cut out of WeWork's restructuring deal. A VC and former student athlete who played with Aaron Rodgers breaks down 7 big opportunities in the burgeoning NIL startup scene. And what's happening today? We have earnings, Amazon and Starbucks and Pinterest, among others. And Binance founder Changpeng Zhao will be sentenced following his guilty plea to failing to maintain an anti-money laundering program. All right, so that's our market news for the day. Now it's time to get into our part 2 of what's going on here. It seems that the evil forces are ruling the day, and they're pretty much doing whatever they want and getting whatever they want. So why are the cultural Marxists winning? Why? What's going on? Something big is definitely on the horizon, folks. Don't be surprised by what you see and hear. Case in point, I believe that today's price action is setting up for a monster rally tomorrow in the stock indexes. And as a result, it may take gold and silver with it and Bitcoin for the ride. So this is an emergency watch alert for Bitcoin, Ethereum, gold, silver, and the US stock indices for tomorrow. I believe that After the press conference, the markets are going to go rip roaring. All right. So that is a warning you need to look out for. But again, while the cultural Marxists winning right now, aside from the market stuff, well, there are some proposed amendments to the World Health Organization's international health regulations. Did you know that? hmm It is going on as we speak. So the question is, what are the implications? What are these implications? What are they going to be for people worldwide if this organization were to be successful in getting the representatives of member countries to accept the proposed amendments? More specifically, what are the likely consequences in terms of the concept and practice of totalitarianism? Well, I believe in order to understand this more fully, one has to get to grips with the mode of rule called totalitarian government. All right. Now, most people have an adequate grasp of full fledged totalitarian rule. They understand the concept, despite recently experiencing it to a certain degree under pandemic conditions. Now, should the amendments proposed by the World Health Organization be accepted in May, which is just a day away, the citizens of the world would be subjected to unadulterated totalitarianism. However, it is worthwhile exploring the full implications of this anonymous mode of governance here as we inch closer and closer to one world government, because that's what it is. You got to call it what it is. This is done in the hope that if representatives of the people, which is what they're supposed to be in legislative bodies around the world, as well as others related to the same topic, that they would think twice before supporting a motion or bill which would in effect grant the World Health Organization the right to usurp the sovereignty of member nations, including the United States of America. Now, the recent developments in the state of Louisiana here in the United States, which amount to the rejection of the World Health Organization's authority, should be an inspiration to other states and countries to follow its example. This is the way to beat the World Health Organization's mendacious pandemic treaty. All right. Now, on her website called Freedom Research, Dr. Merle Nass has described the World Health Organization's notion of pandemic preparedness as a scam boondoggle Trojan horse, which aims, among other things, to transfer, this is it, follow the money, right? Transfer billions of taxpayer dollars directly to the World Health Organization as well as other industries in order to vindicate censorship in the name of public health, and perhaps most importantly, to transfer sovereignty along with the money regarding decision making for public health globally to the Director General of the World Health Organization, which means that legally member countries would lose their sovereignty. Now, in addition, she highlights the fact that the World Health Organization intends to use the idea of One Health to subsume all living beings, ecosystems, as well as climate change under its own authority. Further, to acquire more pathogens for wide distribution. In this way, exacerbating the possibility of pandemics while obscuring their origin. And in the event of such pandemics occurring, justifying the development of more mandatory vaccines and the mandating of vaccine passports and the mandating of lockdowns globally, thus increasing their control over populations. Now, should its attempt at a global power grab succeed, the World Health Organization would have the authority to impose any and every medical program it deems necessary for world health, regardless of their efficacy and side effects, including death. In the proceeding, the word control is a key term. What should be added to it is the term total, that is, total control. Total control. This is the gist of totalitarian rule, and it should therefore be easy to see what the World Health Organization, together with the World Economic Forum and the United Nations, strive for is total or complete control of all people's lives. That's what it boils down to. That's it in a nutshell. Okay. Now, no one has analyzed and elaborated on totalitarianism from this perspective more thoroughly than the German-born American philosopher Hannah Arendt, and her monumental study of this phenomenon, The Origins of Totalitarianism, 1951. It still stands as the authoritative source for the understanding of this historical manifestations. Now, the latter focused on by Arden are 20th century Nazism and Stalinism, but it is not difficult to perceive its lineaments in what we have been living through since 2020. Although a strong case could be made that 2001 marked its indefinable beginning when, in the wake of 9/11, the Patriot Act was passed, arguably laying the authoritarian groundwork for totalitarian rule as clearly perceived by Henry Gore. Now, Arden singles out total terror as the essence of totalitarian government and elaborates as follows. By pressing men against each other, total terror destroys the space between them compared to the condition within its iron band. Even the desert of tyranny, which she distinguishes from totalitarianism, insofar as it's still some kind of space, appears like a guarantee of freedom. Totalitarian government does not just curtail liberties or abolish essential freedoms, nor does it, at least to our limited knowledge, succeed in eradicating the love of freedom from the hearts of men, but it destroys the one essential prerequisite of all freedom, which is simply the capacity of motion, which cannot exist without space. All right? Again, the concept of total terror. Okay? This is fiendish and clever. So the perpetrators of the so-called pandemic emergency were, which was no real pandemic, of course, as the German government recently admitted, it was the thin edge of the wedge, as it were, to insulate total terror into the lives by means of curtailing our access to free movement. We talked about that yesterday, our free movement in space. Now, lockdowns are the signature tool for implementing restrictions of free movements in space. Again, we talked about this in part one yesterday. Remember, freedoms and liberties have been exchanged for permissions, all right, and privileges. Permissions and privileges have replaced freedoms and liberties. Now, it may not on the face of it appear to be the same as or similar to the incarceration of prisoners in the concentration camps under Nazi rule, but arguably the psychological effects of lockdowns approximate those experienced by inmates of these notorious camps in the 1940s. After all, if you're not allowed to leave your house, i.e., that means you're under house arrest, except to go to the shop to buy food or other essentials before you hurry back home, where you dutifully sanitize all the items you brought, a concrete reminder that venturing out in space is potentially lethal. The imperative is the same. You are not allowed out of this enclosure. except under specific conditions. It is understandable that the imposition of such strict spatial boundaries engenders a persuasive sense of fear, which eventually morphs into terror. Small wonder the pseudo authorities promoted, if not commanded, working and studying from home, leaving millions of people cloistered in their homes in front of their computer screens, a, and banning meetings in public, except for a few concessions as far as the numbers of attendees at certain gatherings were concerned. Don't forget, Nancy Pelosi still went to get her hair done after she passed a mandate to shut down all establishments. Again, the laws only apply to the citizens, not the government officials. Now, was just as effective regarding the intensification of terror. Now, most people would not dare transgress these spatial restrictions, given the effectiveness of the campaign to instill a dread of the supposedly lethal novel coronavirus and populations, exacerbating total terror in the process. The images of patients in hospitals attached to ventilators and sometimes looking appealingly, desperately at the camera only served to exacerbate this feeling of dread. They wanted everyone to have that feeling of dread. Why? Because with the advent of the much hyped COVID pseudo vaccines, another aspect of generating terror among the populace manifested itself in the guise of relentless censorship of all dissenting views and opinions on the efficacy and safety of these, as well as on the comparable effectiveness of early treatment of COVID by means of proven remedies such as the hydrochloroquine and levimicin. Now, the clear aim of this was to discredit contrarians who raised doubts over the official valorization of these supposedly miraculous cures for the disease and to isolate them from the mainstream as conspiracy theorists. Now, Arden's insight into the indispensable function of space for human movement also cast the World Economic Forum's plans to create 15-minute cities worldwide in a disturbing new light. But first of all, who gave them the right or the power to come up with an agenda that they're going to make every country do? Again, that's one world government, folks. Wake up. These have been described as open air concentration camps, which would eventually become a reality by prohibiting movement outside of these demarcated areas after an initial period of selling the idea as a way of combating climate change by walking and cycling instead of using carbon emitting motor cars. Now, the World Economic Forum and the World Health Organization's concern with climate change as a punitive threat to global health offers further justification for these planned variations on prisons for the thinly disguised incarceration of millions of people worldwide. The pertinence of Arden's thinking on totalitarianism for the present does not end here, though. Just as relevant as the manner in which it cultivates terror is her identification of loneliness and isolation as prerequisites for total domination. She describes isolation in the political sphere as pre totalitarian. It is typical of the tyrannical governments of dictators, which are pre totalitarian, where it functions to prevent citizens from wielding some power by acting together. So, loneliness is the counterpart of isolation in the social sphere. The two are not identical, and the one can be the case without the other. One can be isolated or kept apart from others without being lonely. The latter only sets in when one feels abandoned by all other human beings. Terror, Arden sagely observes, can rule absolutely, only over people who have been isolated against each other. It therefore stands to reason that to achieve the triumph of totalitarian rule, those promoting its inception would create the circumstances where individuals feel increasingly isolated as well as lonely. Now, it is superfluous to remind anyone of the systemic and inculcation of both of these conditions in the course of the pandemic through what has been discussed already, particularly lockdowns, the restriction of social contact at all levels, and through censorship, which, as remarked earlier, was clearly intended to isolate dissenting individuals. Are you beginning to get it now? And those who were isolated in this way were often, if not usually, abandoned by their family and friends. Remember, you don't want to kill grandma. Stay away from your family and friends. With the consequence that loneliness could and sometimes did follow. In other words, the tyrannical imposition of COVID regulations served the probably intended purpose of preparing the ground for totalitarian rule by creating the conditions for isolation and loneliness to become pervasive. Now, how does totalitarian government differ from tyranny and authoritarianism, where one may still discern the figures of the despot and the sway of some abstract ideal, respectively? Well, Ardent writes, if lawfulness is the essence of non tyrannical government and lawlessness is the essence of tyranny, then terror is the essence of totalitarian domination, because that's what they're after. They're after total domination, total control. Terror, then, is the realization of the law of movement. Its chief aim is to make it possible for the force of nature or of history to race freely through mankind, unhindered by any spontaneous human action. As such, terror seeks to stabilize men in order to liberate the forces of nature by history. It is this movement which signals out the foes of mankind against whom terror is let loose, and no free action of either opposition or sympathy can be permitted to interfere with the elimination of the objective enemy of history or nature, of the class or the race. Guilt and innocence become senseless notions. Guilty is he who stands in the way of the natural or historical process which has passed judgment over inferior races, over individuals unfit to live, over dying classes and decadent peoples. Terror executes these judgments before its court. All concerned are subjectively innocent, and the murdered because they did nothing against the system, and the murderers because they do not really murder but execute a death sentence pronounced by some higher tribunal. The rulers themselves do not claim to be just or wise, but only to execute historical or natural laws. They do not apply positive laws, but execute a movement in ordinance with the inherent law. Terror is lawfulness. If law is the law of the movement of some superhuman force, nature, or history. So the reference to nature and history as superhuman forces pertains to what Arden claims to have been the undergirding beliefs of National Socialism and communism, respectively, in the laws of nature and of history as being independent, virtually primordial powers in themselves. Hence, the justification of terror being inflicted on those who seem to stand in the way of the unfolding of these impersonal forces. When read carefully, the excerpt above paints a picture of totalitarian rule as something predicated on the neutralization of people as human beings in society, as potential agents or participants in its organization or the direction in which it develops. So the rulers are not rulers in the traditional sense. They are merely there to ensure that the suprahuman forces in question is left unhindered to unfold as it should. Now, it takes no genius to perceive in Arden's perspective characterization of totalitarian domination, which she relates to Nazism and Stalinism as its historical embodiments, a kind of template which applies to the emerging totalitarian character of what first manifested itself in 2020 under the superfuge of a global health emergency, something well known to all of us today. Now, since then, other features of this totalitarian movement have emerged, all of which cohere into what may be described in ideological terms as transhumanism. You've heard that mentioned before. Now, this too fits into Arendt's account of totalitarianism, not the transhumanist character as such of this latest incarnation of the attempt to harness humanity as a whole to a suprahuman power, but its ideological status. Just as the Nazi regime justified its operations by appealing to nature in the guise of the vaunted superiority of the Aryan race, for example. So the group of technocratic globalists driving the not so great reset appears to the idea of going beyond humanity to a supposed superior non-natural species, instigating a fusion between humans and machines. Also anticipated, and it seems, by the singularity artist called Stellark. And it's emphasized the idea because, as Arden observes, an ideology is quite literally what its name indicates. It is the logic of an idea. Its subject matter is history to which the idea is applied. The result of this application is not a body of statements about something that is, but the unfolding of a process which is constant change. The ideology treats the course of events as though it followed the same law as the logical exposition of its idea. Now, given the nature of an ideology, as stated above, it should be evident how this applies to the transhumanist ideology of the neo fascist cabal. The idea underpinning the historical process has supposedly always been a kind of transhumanist teleology, alleging the previously hidden teleos or goal of all history has constantly been the attainment of a state of surpassing mere Homo and genus sapiens sapiens, the doubtly wise human man and woman, and actualizing the transhuman. It is all surprising that they have claimed to have acquired godlike powers. And that's where this whole AI comes in and the Elon Musk brain chip. All right, along with the Oculus, made by those things you put on your face. You know what I'm talking about. Apple has it. I think Google has one. This is all fitting together. It all works together. Okay. Now, this further explains the unscrupulousness with which the transhumanist globalists can countenance the functioning and deliberating effects of total terror as identified by Arden. Now, total terror here means the pervasive or totalizing effects of, for example, installing encompassing systems of impersonal, largely AI controlled surveillance and communicating to people, at least initially, that it is for their own safety and security. Remember the phrase you keep hearing: we just want to keep you safe. We just want to keep you safe. We just want to keep you safe. You can't keep anyone safe. You can't even guarantee your own safety. It's impossible. In its truest generic form, safety and security is a myth. If it were not so, then we wouldn't need to have 911. You wouldn't have to call it, because as soon as any danger was upon your person, immediately some force would come and prevent it from even happening. But as it stands today, We have to wait until something goes down before we pick up the phone and call the police, because they're going to tell you there's nothing we can do until a crime has been committed. What if the crime that is about to be committed is a murder? Then the person has to drop the body before the police can come and arrest them, because now a crime has taken place. You see where we're going with this? So the psychological consequences, however, amount to a subliminal awareness of the closure of free space, which is replaced by a sense of spatial confinement and of there being no way out. Against this backdrop, reflecting on the looming possibility that the World Health Organization may indeed succeed in getting competent nations to accept the proposed amendments to their health regulations, yields greater insight into the concrete effects this would have. And these aren't pretty, ladies and gentlemen, to say the least. In a nutshell, it means that this unelected organization would have the authority to proclaim lockdowns in medical or health emergencies, as well as mandatory vaccinations at the whim of the World Health Organization's Director General, reducing the freedom to traverse space freely to ironclad spatial confinement in one fell swoop. This is what total terror would mean. It's my fervent hope that something can still be done to avert this imminent nightmare. And it's looking like it is definitely imminent. And unfortunately, it's looking like there's been little effort to stop it. Yeah, we're headed in the total totalitarian tyranny, folks. I hope you're prepared for it. I hope you're ready. Unfortunately, people have been like, down with capitalism, down with this and that, not knowing, not fully understanding that they've never experienced true capitalism. You haven't, because it hasn't been allowed to thrive. It's just what it is, folks. All right, facts. All right. So I hope you understand what's going down, because this whole system they're trying to bring down to bring in a new one. And the new one, no one's going to like. All right. No one's going to like it. I guarantee you, you are not going to like it. They've already told you. What did they tell you? They told you that you will own nothing and be happy. That's what they told you. You will own nothing and be happy. So at the end of the day, remember, somebody owns it. It's just not going to be you. They're letting you know that they're going to own it. They want total control over your life and liberty and freedom. And they're replacing it with privilege. This is unbelievable, folks. All right. So, with that being said, the system works if you work the system. Bulls make money, bears make money, and pigs get slaughtered. So, remember to take what you can and give nothing back. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out. Peace.